end.
Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts, Keith Bogan.
Hello.
And Chad Holloway, who are both on assignment. Chad is in Colombia visiting his family, and Keith is in Colorado with his brothers. But he looks like he's in a bunker.
I am in the basement, yes. I'm not out in the beautiful weather like Chad is. I am actually in the basement right now, although I could have taken this into the backyard. They have a beautiful backyard, and I could have hung there. But here in Denver, it's not quite as warm as it is in Columbia. So I think that the discretion is the better part of valor.
Probably isn't as warm as it is home either. About 57 degrees out now. And
it's probably about that now here, and we're going to have our warmest day since I got here. But I had outdoor dining last night, and it was probably 52 degrees for dinner, so that was fun.
Yeah, it's probably 85 here.
Oh,
thanks, Chad. You can now depart the call. We don't need you anymore.
There we go.
It rained a little bit last.
And Doug is at religious services. He may pop in somewhere along the way later on. I'm not sure. It sounded like there's a possibility of it, but we will see. He's done it before, so we're just going to wing it. When I started thinking about topics, or we started thinking about topics for the week, I don't think we were drawing blanks, but one thing kind of happened in the news, and it kind of was like, do we really need to think of a topic? We've all heard by now what has happened in the political world, and the world as it is right now, with the announcement that President Trump has COVID in the middle of all of this. And we'll go through some of how you would go about handling this because we've had things that have happened to politicians along the way in the world, and it is what it is. Funny to use that now. You've had attempts on presidents and things like that. How do you handle it? This is the first time where it's been a major illness that is on a global scale as much as COVID is. So we will get into that in the coming moments. The one thing that I want to say before we actually start, I want to bring this point up. And it's something somebody said: will there be an effect of Trump's diagnosis on the election? In 1960, when Vice President Nixon ran against Kennedy, it was the first time they televised a debate. Nixon had the flu and had apparently, somewhere along the way, getting out of the car, smashed his knee up and looked horrible, looked haggard, looked like he was had been through World War III when he made that first visual appearance on the first debate with Kennedy. People say his appearance at that debate made people question whether he could lead, because maybe there's something more and it affected the election. So we will go into whether this will have an effect on the election and things like that. Chad, since Keith is muted, Chad, you want to kick us off here?
Sure. I think you could go either way. Like we talked about a little bit off camera. If he gets this and recovers from it, maybe it helps people. Maybe there's a sympathy piece for him. to gain more voters. But it could make him look weak as well. I mean, we have to face it, guys. We have two guys that are in their 70s running for president, and it's, probably not the best case scenario. I don't know the last time. I don't know who the ages of the various presidents when they've been president, but we've got a couple of old guys, and there's some questions, I think, on the health of both of them, especially now. So, there's already some question about what they can bring and how much vigor they can bring to the office at their ages, I believe. So this, it could go either way. He could either come through it pretty strongly, and people think, oh well, he's got some resilience in his body, and he can overcome this. That's such a bad disease, or could go the other way. I'm not sure, but I do think that it will affect it.
Well, Hillary was in her 60s. I think she's close to 70 now. She's in her 70s. I'm pretty sure. So it happened last election as well, and you had McCain in 2008, who was, I believe, in his very late 60s at the time when he ran. So I mean, there have been quite a few where we're still into, and it seems like, that time of an older set of presidential candidates. It had changed clearly in 2018, and really took a major change in 2012, where both candidates were, I'm pretty sure Mitt Romney was, not compared to Obama young, but Mitt himself was pretty young as well. So.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, like, we have 350 million people in the country, and the two people we have could be a little more physically healthy, that's one of the things I look for, is why can't we find somebody who's physically healthy and is willing to work together? I think that's the big thing that we're missing right now in politics, is everybody is so divided. Let's get together and work together. And somebody with some good policies and some clear policies. What is it that you want to accomplish, and what is it, and how are you going to do it, as opposed to what we have now, which I think both are a little vague at times.
Right.
Well, that's being a politician. I mean, and I think that's the part that I don't think will change. Politicians, no matter what you do, they won't pin themselves down to a position, because they have to appease so many different elements of society. I doubt seriously in 2024 whoever runs will be any more prone to pinning themselves down or being vague, as you put it. You're absolutely right. However, I think that we've seen the last of the septuagenarians. I don't think we'll ever see a candidate again in their 70s, at least in our generations, and in our lifetimes. Maybe when lifetimes extend, in 70s or like the new 50s, you'll see some of that. But we're a long ways away from that, and I don't think any of us will survive long enough to see that.
Well, to a point, you have the older politicians now that would be running for president seem to be some of the most hated politicians as well. So that would be another reason why there's no way you'll probably see many more people the age of Trump and Biden running.
I think in 2024 you're going to see people in their 40s. I mean, it'll be such a backlash, and it's going to follow the same pattern as the Supreme Court justices. I mean, what is Amy Conley, Barrett, whatever, I forget her exact name, but isn't she 48? And I think that from now on, you're only going to see justices being nominated who are in their 40s, which sort of goes against intelligent thinking, if you ask me, because you want to have somebody who has this really long road of experience, and is really learned in the areas of the law. And she's only been essentially practicing law. I'm sorry, not practicing law. Been a judge for
2 years. Yeah. 2.5 years only.
Yeah. So I mean, it totally flies in the face of what everybody always thought the Supreme Court could be. But by the way, interesting side note, I read last night that you literally have to have no qualifications to be on the Supreme Court. The Constitution calls for nothing, not age. You don't have to have a law degree. You don't even have to be a U.S. citizen. It's
Right.
unbelievable. There's no requirements whatsoever to be on the Supreme Court. Anyone can serve who is literally on this planet.
Interesting.
Mind-boggling. And nobody's talking about that. But I think the Conley nomination will probably shed some light on that. And I wonder if in the next 4 years, let's say the Democrats win, that there's going to be a strong move to pass another constitutional amendment about that, because it should have been. That's probably the most gigantic loophole in our Constitution that we've ever had. But back to the presidents, yeah, I think that even before the current president came down with COVID, I think that everybody was itching and saying, this is ridiculous. Why are these the only two candidates? And I think neither party will be stupid enough to do this again. And people like Clinton will be too old at that point. I mean, she simply will be too old. Bernie will be too old. McConnell will be too old. People like that. Just to even be realistic to try it. Although we are ignoring the fact that if Trump wins in November, there's a good chance that Trump will once again be our president in 2024, because he'll change the Constitution and allow him.
If he changes the Constitution, you know who the Democrats are going to put up, and there's no way Trump gets it.
If he wins in 3 weeks, he's going to be in power for life. He's going to change everything, and he's going to fix everything.
If there is an actual general election in 2024 without manipulation, the Democrats are going to run Barack Obama, and he's going to win. He would destroy Trump.
But the way it looks like Trump is fixing the election this time, there's not going to be any accurate outcome of it anyway. It's going to be some manipulation.
It won't even be. It will not even be close, because it's not going to happen. The independents in 2024. The independents would go for Barack Obama before they would go for Donald Trump. That's for sure. The independents have been running. The independents have been running from him since he shut the government down almost 2 years ago.
If logic prevailed, then Donald Trump would get 10% of the vote coming up in this election in 3 weeks. But there is no logic, and there's no legality going on right now. There's nothing that we're going to see in 3 weeks that's actually per the Constitution. It's going to be ugly. Now, I'm not saying Trump will win, but there's going to be a lot of bullshit going on.
If he survives.
Well, that's pretty radical, but okay.
Yeah, I think he'll survive. He's got the best docs, right? So.
Yeah, but you're getting conflicting reports from the doctors and his people, so somebody doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. I tend to believe who that is that doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about, but
you would not expect to get anything that's closely resembling the truth from anyone connected to the situation. I mean, they haven't spoken the truth in 4 years. Why would they start now? But that could be said of any president. Obviously, you know where I stand, but most presidents shield information for sure. Perhaps not on the level that this one has, but most of them don't necessarily openly talk about what they're doing or how healthy they are. FDR had a history of, he had polio. He couldn't even walk, but nobody, for the most part, knew about it. The media literally got together and said, we're not going to discuss it in the media. Jack Kennedy had a horrendous back condition that, really inhibited his mobility.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't exactly big news at the time of his presidency either. There have been presidents throughout history who concealed this, that, and the other thing. I mean, Ronald Reagan was completely senile for his entire second term. He wasn't even our president, for crying out loud.
Well, like you said, FDR. I mean, FDR. The most of the pictures he had, they had taken of him, and any images of him was shot from here up. So
even the ones that showed the full body, he wouldn't be in his wheelchair. He would be in a regular chair with his legs crossed. Even though he didn't do it, he didn't cross his own leg, but he would be staged that way. There's plenty of pictures.
And the ones he was standing, there were some. He wasn't on the crutches. He had a cane or had somebody essentially was real close to them, holding him up or propping him up. Now, there is one thing that. Well, first I do want to touch on the debate very quickly. One thing that not going to get into the mess it was, but one thing that that I think came to a point of, and I think it came quickly when as much as he shouldn't, I don't know if he should have said it. The comment from Biden, "Shut up, man." I don't know if he should have said that, but it's the first time that where Trump is known for his bullying. For the first time, somebody basically stepped up and said, "You're not going to bully me." Because truthfully, for as crazy as Joe Biden is, he's a tough fucker. You're not going to push him around. And that's something that he had to show right away, immediately. He was not going to let Trump push him around. And now another thing is, there's the one thing that I read that about this being a hoax, that they're giving him more, that they were trying to give Trump more time to prepare for the debate. Why would you need more time to debate somebody who you have called a stupid man?
Well, he certainly set the bar so low that all Biden had to do was show up and complete a few sentences, and he would exceed expectations of all of Trump's followers. So that was pretty foolish of him. Yes, remembering what we do here in this podcast, I want to mention my sons, and I was with my younger son for the presidential debate, which was an extraordinarily enjoyable experience to watch it with him. And I will say that when Vice President Biden said, just shut up, man, the room that I was in exploded in cheering. It was just, people were thrilled beyond imagination. I think there was probably cheering across this country when that was said.
Oh, sure.
It was a phenomenal experience to be part of. And Jeremy and I we spent the entire debate slapping our heads over and over again. Like, how is this possible? How is this disaster possible? I do want to put in a plug for Chris Wallace, by the way, who has been assailed by this entire country. And I personally think he was the best moderator in the history of presidential debates. I thought he did a phenomenal job.
Well,
he had a tough job.
Given
he had a tough job. Yeah,
he was with.
He did the best he could.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But I've had some conversations with both of my sons, and they're much like their generation, being 18 and 21. They're both very left side of the aisle, if you will. So it wasn't like this was going to tip their scale or anything like that. But they did a lot of analysis of the stuff that was talked about. They were actually very disappointed in Biden because Biden, like you say, didn't really pin down his positions, because you don't really pin them down in a debate. And they're still young and naive enough to think that that's what a debate is for, to come out and talk about your real position. And they'll learn that, that's what politicians don't do, that sort of thing publicly at all. There's a whole lot of, look at my website. It's clearly written on my website, but I'm not going to say it right here.
Right.
And we've all read the articles about how the debates historically don't tip the needle very much. I mean, with the Nixon-Kennedy debate, maybe as an exception. I don't even think that the Trump-Clinton debate, with his lurking behind her and acting weird, tipped the needle at all. At that point, she'd already screwed up her strategy in terms of ignoring some states. So
that debate didn't. But the second debate in 2012, when Barack Obama turned around. Now remember time frame here. 2012, between the first and second debate, I believe, is when Benghazi happened. We're somewhere around there, and it was brought up in the second debate, and Barack Obama turned around and went, "The buck stops here." And everybody went, "What? What did you say?" And then you had Mitt Romney do this for the next debate and a half, because he realized he was in deep shit.
Well, he never had a prayer. I mean, he was going to get crushed right from the beginning anyway. There was no Republican candidate that could have challenged Obama in his second term. And you're right. If he was able to run for a third term, he would absolutely do very well in a legitimate election for sure.
Hmm?
Um, uh, and I hope that there's a lot of work done. By the way, side note, over the next 4 years to set up a much better system of mail-in ballots and all that sort of thing, or drop box. I think mail-in's stupid because they're taking apart the post office anyway. Drop boxes, I think that's the one, the key. And make, I have a whole, we could do a whole podcast on that because it's so simple to make it a reliable system. And but unfortunately, every state does it differently, and some states go out of their way to try to delegitimize it so it doesn't look good. But it would be very simple to have a national mandate on how to do that and make it very reliable. Um, but I don't want to take us off track here. Certainly, I'm curious to see, particularly not to ignore Chad or Doug if he comes on, but I'm always interested to hear what the girls in the Miles household, how they react to these things. They probably heard that the president is sick. They've probably heard that the debate was a shit show. And what did these young girls say? I want to hear about that.
Sadie, Delana, come here for a minute. Come here.
I mean, Chad's kid is Frankie's
Come here.
a
What?
man. Frankie's a man. Justin,
Come here.
Jeremy, a man.
Come here.
And it's not the girl boy thing. It's more of the age. The mature people
Come here.
I can figure it out.
Come here.
Yeah.
Sadie, come here. Say, oh, wait, come here for a minute. I need to ask you a question. Come here. Then stand there and listen to my
Actually,
question.
I need to ask you a question.
Keith needs to ask you a question. Can you hear him? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, ask.
I can't see you though. Can you come into the picture?
She doesn't want to.
Did you hear that the president is not feeling well?
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that? What do you know about that?
Honestly. Okay. Say it, Delana. Delana.
No.
Delana.
We don't have to. We don't want
Please just answer the question.
Well, okay, so what
Sadie,
that's
can you answer
telling
the
me.
What do you think of Trump? What do you know about Trump?
that he's a bad president.
Come here. What else? What else do you know about him being sick? What do you know?
That he had coronavirus.
What do you think about that?
So
I don't
what
know
this
if you heard
tells
her.
me is we have the younger generation.
I don't know if
can't-
you heard her. Did you?
I didn't hear the very last word, but
Good.
that's interesting. But that may be reflective of her parents' thinking.
Our mothers more than our fathers, but yeah.
But at that, it's so you have your hands full more than anybody. Like I was alluding to, Frankie is obviously has his own set of opinions. He's informed. He does his own research. Justin and Jeremy are the same way. Doug's kids, I would also be curious to ask him that question because they're a little bit younger. What were they, 13 and 10 or something like that? I think we're somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I think his youngest son is a year older than Delana.
So I wouldn't necessarily expect Sadie and Delana to have an informed opinion yet, although they probably more reflect off of what they're hearing in the household, which is fine. But Doug's kids are definitely at that age where they're starting to think about their own commentaries and what they, how they would. Uh-oh, here comes a puppy. You'll see a tail or two go by in the background. Good morning, Jake. Jake's the dog. Anyway, he was very good. He just went upstairs. Anyway, he'd be curious to hear what his kids have to say as well. As they start to formulate opinions, because especially the 13-year-old, he won't be he won't be ready to vote in the 2024 election, but he's getting pretty close. So what is the up and coming group thinking about this? I can tell you that the massive amount of support that Biden and the Democrats in general, or the non-Republicans, seem to have on the from the 18 to 24 group. I mean, I think that's the group that's going to really change the election. That's the one that's going to come out and vote like it's never voted before. If Biden winds up winning it, I think it'll be because of that. And I wonder it's too early to tell, but I wonder what their opinion is of Trump being ill right now and how the debates went down and things like that.
I personally think that if Biden wins, he steps down within 4 years anyway.
It would be surprising to see him go for a second term. I'd be surprised. Yeah.
Now here's a question that I've been thinking of. Wishing nothing on anybody. What if one of these people who came in contact with, let's say, Chris Christie or I wouldn't say Hope Hicks, because I think Hope Hicks is the one who may have been in the whole thing of this. I don't think it's directly the president. I think he got it, and then they all got it from somebody, not from him.
I'd agree. You're right.
Anyway, what if one of these poor people passes away? Will that reflect on Trump in this election? Because it was kind of with his own disregard that would have happened, that they would have gotten this. Because Christie came out and said, we weren't wearing masks when we prepped them for the debate. So, yeah, that was clearly with the president's own disregard that was done. Do you think that it'll have an impact if one of them doesn't make it through this?
I would love to say yes, but I don't think so. I think that the Kool-Aid has been so strong that it simply won't matter.
For his base. But for the voters that are undecided, I think it might.
We're 3 weeks out. Do you really think there are that many left?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I don't know how many are truly left. I mean, I don't think 1 million or 2 million is going to tip the scale at this point. I think that the popular vote division will be much larger than the 3 million that Trump had less than Clinton in 2016. I think that the popular vote will be 5, 6, 7, 8 million in difference. It's just a question of how the Electoral College comes down.
If it's as high as 5, the likelihood is the Electoral College will flip.
I've seen plenty of maps that say that it could be somewhere between 5 and 8 million, and still
highly unlikely.
The wrong way.
Highly unlikely.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you. Highly unlikely, but there are roads to doing it.
Because I don't know the thing about that with 2012 is it was pockets of states in the swing states that he won as to why he won. He has lost a lot of those pockets in Ohio. He has lost a lot of those pockets in Pennsylvania because they're all pissed off about, especially in Ohio, about the job loss. Because he went all out about keeping the auto industry in Ohio and Indiana. Didn't happen. He lied. That was another lie he was caught in, especially Ohio. 2 years ago, they had started to flip, and Ohio has gone blue in a lot of the elections. And in the communities that he was slaughtering in, he's not slaughtering anymore.
It's funny you should say that. As we haven't alluded to, but I drove out here to Colorado. So I drove 1,954 miles to arrive at my brother's place where I am now. So it gave me a lot of chance to see Middle America. And the beginning part of the trip through Pennsylvania was all back roads. And a lot of the Ohio part was back roads too. So it was a lot longer than you would expect in terms of time on the road. But I saw something fascinating in those two states because I was off the main highways, and that was a mix of signage. You know how people have all the signs in there, and I expected, especially outside of Philadelphia and
4
Pittsburgh.
years ago, they were all Trump signs.
Yeah, I expected it to be all Trump, and it wasn't. It was definitely 50-50 all in the backwater areas, and Ohio wasn't
My
much
point.
different.
That was my
Now, I
point.
will say that driving through the great state of Missouri, that Chad is rather familiar with, um, there were massive billboards every 5 miles for Trump. I mean,
yeah.
and the huge stuff. And Biden doesn't advertise that way, so there was nothing for Biden. But if you were off, like when I got off to get gas or something like that, you'd see plenty of Biden signs on front lawns. But the big billboards were hysterical. I mean, get on the Trump train and all that stuff, and all sorts of great graphics and all that. They were very creative with their billboards.
Farmers put it and say have a little message along their fence row, and big signs that they put out there along with the billboards too. I know because I actually live in Illinois, so I didn't get to Missouri that much, but I know
right.
what it's like.
Forgetting you're on the Illinois side. Yeah.
Part of
Missouri.
that,
Okay. I'm from Missouri.
part of that reason, Keith, of why it's now much more blended in Ohio is, again, I go back to the promises. I drove through there I believe it was, I don't know if it was his second, I think it was still his first term, Obama's first term. It was, it's very black out there. And by black, what I mean is there's a lot of farms that you have no crops growing because it's just the farming economy out there has been going on the decline for years. It was on the decline prior to Obama, declined more during Obama's first term, leveled off. The thing is, after promise after promise after promise of recovery, it's gone back downhill again during Trump's first term. So that's probably why you're seeing a lot of that signage, because the blackness that is in Ohio of those empty farms has increased greatly since the Trump administration took over. So there's part of the reason why Ohio is much more blended than it was 4 years
Pretty
ago.
scary. We also have even though Governor DeWine in Ohio is a Republican, he's very, very moderate. He's very much in the middle of the road, just like his predecessor, John Kasich was.
Right.
And both of them are clearly supporting Biden. So you have a lot of influence there. So places like Ohio, I think to a certain extent, places like Pennsylvania, the recent spate of violence in Wisconsin is going to be very interesting to see which way that was going, because it was definitely heading toward Biden. But I don't know, they've had so much violence up there lately, and they've had such an enormous spike in COVID too. They're the worst state to be in right now is Wisconsin. But in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see much larger spikes in a lot of the Midwestern states. Everywhere that we call red is not everywhere, but a lot of the states that we know as red states are going to have enormous spikes in case counts. I mean, if the model that the White House uses, which has under predicted each time it's predicted, is anywhere accurate. There's 371,000 dead by the end of December and 3,000 people by day. Most of that's going to happen in the Midwest. Most of that's going to happen in Middle America. Most of that's going to happen in red states. And the interesting part about the model is that the true explosion of death of people dying isn't until after the election, like literally a week or two after the election. We'll still stay steady around 800, 1,000, 1,200 people a day for the next couple of weeks. And then right after the election, it's supposed to skyrocket upward to, literally we're going to lose 3,000 people a day at times. That would have us, if that happened 4 weeks earlier, there wouldn't even be a doubt about who's going to win the election. But nobody believes it until it actually happens. So that's not actually, again, the Kool-Aid is so strong, I don't think anybody's going to pay attention to even the models, as accurate as they've been. With the coming hell that we're going to have at the end of November and December, nobody's going to say, nobody who is remotely thinking about voting for Trump is going to care.
But I think some of that too, Keith, is that the models have not been that accurate. Like when they initially came out with the models, they were way off, and I still,
right, they were way down. They under each time that White House model has predicted an amount, it underestimated.
He's right.
But I think CDC has way overestimated it. It's kind of like egg yolks. It's like, are they good for you? Are they bad? Sometimes they are. It depends on the study you read. And I think the science is so conflicting. And I think with this, it's such a new disease, and having been in epidemiology, I mean, one of my secondary areas is epidemiology. It's hard to predict this stuff. It's hard to model that stuff. I mean, what are the variables you put into a model to create that? I mean, certainly there are minds greater than mine that are doing this, but at the same time, it's hard to estimate. And there are some that are way overshooting it, and some that are way under. So it's one of those things like I don't trust. I'm totally believe in science, but I don't believe any of the models myself.
I would agree with you, but that you can always find models that are over predicting and then you can find that are under predicting, and they're all over the map. I'm only pointing at the one that the White House has chosen to use, and that it has been a very consistent 10 to 15% under predicting. So if it does that again, we're talking about probably slightly in excess of 400,000 people that die. Well, the total amount of deaths by the end of December instead of 371. Roughly speaking, that's where the under predicting would land us. We're literally talking about doubling the amount of people who have died in the next 3 months for the first 7 months of the outbreak. But the incredible surge of that, if we follow that one model that the White House has chosen, it's so bizarre that it doesn't start until after November 3rd. It doesn't get worse until after November 3rd. I'm telling you, November and December are going to be, and January are going to be hellacious months like this country has never seen before. We're going to skyrocket past the 678,000 people who died in 1918. We're going to blow past that so fast, even if Biden wins, because there's no way he won't be able to impact anything until January 20th.
Meanwhile, we have those people that said this will all be over by election day after the election. How'd that work?
Which is going to be completely the opposite of what if this model continues to be accurate, then it's exactly the opposite of what's actually going to happen. And then, of course, even though Biden won't be in power, of course, he'll be blamed for it all after November 3rd. That would be the piece de resistance on that for sure. But let's see, Chad, I hope you're right. I hope this model completely F's it up and is completely wrong, because
I doubt it. I doubt it.
It literally, remember how bad it was in May and June? Like the end of April, May and June. That will be nothing compared to what's coming. Nothing.
Yeah. And my point is, I just don't know what to believe, because there are so many conflicting models that are out there. So it could be super high or it could be super low. I don't know, because there's not a model with an R square that I trust.
I don't think it's going to be super low, because you haven't even cut this thing in half or anywhere near in half since they said they started to get it under control.
I bow to greatness. By the way, as soon as Chad said R squared, I'm out. I don't know what he's talking about. So
it's a regression. It's a component of a regression model that tells you with the predictability of an equation.
So I got
the points, and you draw a straight line through there. How well does that model predict where those points are going to be?
I got a Six Sigma, the base level Six Sigma certification a number of years ago. So I vaguely recognize what you're talking about, but I'm trying desperately to forget it.
Yeah, I hear you. I had to take a lot of stuff, unfortunately.
All I can say is, regardless, if we go as we literally head toward what I think is going to happen, which is approaching 1 million dead or more, um, and I'm sure the man in the White House now would say, "Well, it would have been 10 million if I hadn't stepped in," and I'm not going to go there. You guys know how I feel about that.
Well, he hasn't. So anything he says from now on, take with a grain of salt. So
For sure.
it's his own stupidity that he got it.
Hi, Jake. I'm petting a dog right now. He's behaving himself, but we'll see how long that lasts. um, anyway, what for another time? What will this pandemic leave? What kind of world will it leave for the kids who will be voting in 2024 and 2028? When people like Eric Trump are going to be running for office, and Chelsea Clinton and things like that.
Eric Trump is probably going to be in jail.
That is, that's the general consensus. But
So with his father and his sister, possibly.
If his father finds a way to stay in power, then all bets are off. It doesn't matter how guilty people are.
That's not guaranteed.
I'm for another time. Because that's a long conversation.
Yeah.
Hi, Jake.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a conversation for another time, but I've seen a big difference in my life in the people who are prosecuted for crimes who are at a powerful level versus those who are kind of ordinary citizens, if you will.
Oh, I know. I know. There's a friend of mine who's going through some issues. I won't get into that right now. But had he been a little more powerful than he is, he probably wouldn't be in anywhere near as much trouble as they're going to be. But I digress. The thing is, I don't know if we've seen the end of this with the Trump line right now. It's happened where it's happened to, I think there was 8 people. One was outside. One that has gotten it this week had nothing to do with Trump or any of the rallies or anything like that. He was nowhere near the president. One of the senators, it was he got it from his home state. Forgot which one of the senators it was. But one of them was at the rally the nomination for the Supreme Court justice. Now that's another interesting thing is, she revealed yesterday, I believe, that she had it, or it was revealed yesterday that she had it in the summer. You have some people who go, "Oh, okay, she's not going to get it. She's fine." No, she's not. You can get it more than once. It has happened. It's been documented that it has happened. People have had it more than once for sure. Now you have this going on of the Supreme Court nomination. Now, sort of thanks to this idea, this thing with the president, you have 3 Republican senators who have COVID. Now, even if they do it through Zoom, which is not going to happen, the Democrats can stop that from happening. They can't do a nomination through Zoom. Not going to happen. Because the Republicans aren't even going to stand for it. They will have enough that, because some of them may not be able to stand for it. If the 3 get too sick to even do it on Zoom, it definitely isn't going to happen, because you have the other 2 that were going to voted against nominating her in the first place, the nomination committee meeting in the first place. It definitely calls into jeopardy. This is thrown into jeopardy, Trump's nomination, at least getting it through by Election Day. And if they get it through by Election Day, if they don't get it through by Election Day, it may not happen that they're going to get their choice here. Because you'll have a couple of the Republican senators, especially the ones who may be on the way out the door, will fight for it. The ones that won re-election will turn around and go, no, you're not this isn't happening. because they're going to say then they'll be really trying to save their own skin, or ones that are coming up for election in the next year or two. They're going to be trying to save their own skin after election day. So that has definitely another caveat of this is what seemed like a lock isn't a lock anymore. So
You also have to think that the election day may be November 3rd, but it's clear we're not going to know the results until close to the end of the month at the very earliest. They've gone out of their way to make sure that, that's what part of what I would change is that the inability to count the, millions of ballots that have already been submitted until November 3rd is just stupid. It's just absolutely stupid. That all that stuff should be counted as it comes in, for crying out loud. You don't release the results or anything like that, but it should, the only votes you should be counting on November 3rd are the ones that are cast on November 3rd.
Yeah, I agree. And they should set up the mail-in, I think, to be received before November 3rd.
They did.
No, there are some states where as long as it's postmarked by November 3rd, as long as it's postmarked.
Here it's got no. Here it's got to be in 3 days early.
And I think that varies by state, though, because I think each state, whatever governing body is in charge of that, I think regulates that. So that's going to be a mess as well, just because some places, to Keith's point, some places are counting them as they come in. Other places have to just wait to count them. But it's going to be delayed. But even in that case, even if we have the election day and we know who's president, still their term runs through January, right? So it seems like they could make that vote on the Supreme Court justice.
They won't, because you're going to have Republicans, like I said, who after election day are going to have to worry about their own elections, and they're not going to vote for it. Because they're 3 away from that. That's number one. Number two, these 3 senators may not be the last to get COVID. There's been senators the whole time who have gotten it. So it's going to throw this whole thing off if they don't start it within the next couple of weeks. Plus, you have her who was around him during this time where he has gotten it. So she's going to probably have to quarantine for 2 weeks too. So that pushes the whole time frame back past election day, which it may not help matters at all to even put it through. Especially if Trump wins, it's one thing. If he doesn't, it's completely different. It's a complete another thing where you're going to have senators who are going to go, no, Biden should have the pick, not the president that sits there.
Yeah.
Because you had especially somebody like Mitt Romney who will turn around and go, and he'll be the third of the 4 they need, will turn around and go, oh, no, Trump's not getting his pick. No, it's not happening. He'll give Biden his pick. He won't care. There's other ones who will just go.
Romney is not doing that now, even before the election. I'm really shocked.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But I guess I don't understand why people think he should wait until the election. I mean, we're talking about Supreme Court justice. It's not a circuit court justice. It's a Supreme Court justice. There's lots of very important things to be heard, and it's not like this is something that's not important. It's a very important thing, and it seems like to me it makes sense that whoever that sitting president is, whether I agree with him or not, should make the call and should put their
Then why wasn't Obama allowed to do it 10 months before his election? Before the election came up. He was the sitting president.
I don't know.
You're talking about a double standard here. So
well, but
no. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. No.
Exactly. It's a double standard for everybody. Both sides have the double standards. So I see that, but I don't understand that. I mean, and the other thing is remember when Obama went to RBG and said you should consider retiring because I think he wanted to at that time replace her and to have some control over what was happening with her with that seat.
Yeah.
So for me, like, and I don't care who's in office. I mean, it's the business of the country. Let's get somebody in there and let's move forward. That's my perspective.
Well, I saw an interesting article. an interesting survey the other day that a majority of people believe that it's time that if they do put in Coney, they may actually, there's a belief that now is the time to elect Democrats to the political office to keep balance. So you may see the Senate flip as well. Very, if not this time, next time in midterms, Senate is going to flip as well. And the Democrats may retain control in the House.
Maybe, but I think sometimes when we talk about parties, it gets to be too convoluted. I mean, to Keith's point earlier, I think he was the one that brought up that John Kasich was the governor of Ohio, but he was very middle of the road. So, I mean, each of these people have a different position, whether or not they establish themselves or consider themselves Republicans or Democrats. I think it's really a position that the individual takes, because there's people on both sides that go, that person is probably a good choice. This person is not, even though they might be on the same ticket. You understand? So to say that they're going to vote on a party base, I hope people really aren't. I know people do, but it's just something I don't necessarily agree with from my perspective, because I look at each person like, how is this person going to impact my part of society?
Right. It's a tough situation because it made it stranger and more difficult with this happening to Trump this week. I mean, it definitely called into question a ton of issues with the whole thing of Trump getting COVID. It's insane to even think it. And here's an interesting thing is he ripped on Clinton when she got pneumonia in the middle of the election. It's kind of like, well, it's wild because this is not the first time where a president's gotten sick or anything like that. There was a president who was elected president, went out and did his inauguration speech in cold, hard weather in Washington, D.C., caught pneumonia and died. So, I mean, this mentality, some of these people have mentality that they're invincible, and they're not, clearly. It's just, when these things happen, especially when it's something like an illness, it's kind of just like, whoa, what just happened? It's a shock to the system. When it comes to dealing with that with kids, it makes it hard to think, how do you deal with it pretty much the same way you would deal with any kind of tragedy, an assassination or anything like that. Or like when Reagan needed to be put under for major surgeries, things like that, or major surgery for. We've kind of been. We've been fortunate where it is the exception more than the rule of a president needing to I'm not going to, putting the assassinations aside, of a president needing a surgery where he needs to be put out, needs to be incapacitated to have the vice president take over, or is so sick that they need the vice president to come in and invoke the 25th Amendment, where that's how he takes over, blah, blah, blah. Now, an interesting thing is I've been hearing that the misconception that if Trump is incapacitated and Mike Pence is incapacitated, that what is her name?
President Pelosi, you're talking about.
Yes, President Pelosi. No, that absolutely 100% is not the case. The line of succession only goes for president. She would be president, but the misconception here is that if Pence takes over and is fine, she doesn't become the vice president. The vice president.
I don't know anybody who has that misperception.
No, there's
Pence's
people that
second.
believe that she's the vice president. No, she's not.
I knew we had an ignorant country, but
Yeah, she's not the vice president. The vice president becomes a vacancy, just like it did with Johnson. And when the vice president was impeached, and then Nixon was obviously in his own turmoil, that's why they're but nobody replaced Spiro Agnew. So, because he was impeached,
that's not true. He did eventually replace the vice president.
That was pretty much as he was going out of office. He was about to be on his way out of office when he put Ford in there because he knew.
I'm talking about Nelson Rockefeller.
Oh, that's right.
Don't forget about him. He did. There was a vacancy for a while, but they put Rockefeller in.
That wasn't his choice.
I don't remember the specifics about it. Unlike you, I was too young, but
I believe Rockefeller was congressional appointment. And then Rockefeller said, "Nah, I'm done," and Ford came in for it.
Right, something to that effect. Right.
And then it was a second congressional replacement that was Gerald Ford, knowing that Ford would take over as president. That was the implementation. Was the Republicans wanted Ford? Don't know why, but they wanted Gerald Ford to be president.
Just my only political statement of the day that's very clear is that I am wishing a recovery, not necessarily a speedy one, but a recovery for our president, because I don't like the alternative of what would happen if he for some reason died in office. That's a topic for another conversation too.
Right. We pretty much, it's been 2020 itself, since COVID had started, has been a clusterfuck. And now we're into, it seems like, accelerated clusterfuck, because we've had now the president contract this, and then you have, as was suspected, you've had NFL games now affected by COVID-19, 3 so far this week. 2 so far this week. A third actually got away without it, without having to make any changes to the game is going to happen. And now it's just this whole thing has turned into a nightmare beyond belief with COVID. I don't think anyone could have ever predicted that this would become what it's become since 2020 and the whole COVID thing started.
I just find it interesting that here we are 3 weeks out from the election, and suddenly there's so many national prominent figures who have it, who come down with it. But it's and I wonder if that's going to accelerate over the next 3 weeks. The weather's getting cooler. Everybody says it gets a lot worse in colder weather and all that sort of thing. So there's something to be said for that. But we have a major sport, football, that has decided that they're going to play without any restrictions whatsoever, except for the fact that there are no fans in the stadium. They're not in any kind of bubble. They're not undergoing any protection. They're doing a terrible, piss poor job of doing things like wearing masks on the sidelines, and they're getting fined for it left and right. And then you have the politicians who are suddenly, boom, boom, boom. You're starting to get a bunch of them who are coming down with it as well. I just have to wonder, even the status of what will this country be like, and how many well-known people will have it by the time we do this show next week. That should be very interesting, because it's going to happen really quickly now, I think.
want to think in some of the places that have the cold weather coming on. You know, you said earlier, Keith, that you had been outside eating in Denver, and I mean it's the same back in Illinois. Everybody's eating outside, and now you have to go from the outside to the inside, and you have that spacing. But it's a little different, you know. But it's one thing to have kind of everything open, but now you're putting people in something with more of an enclosed space. So I think there's a lot of difficulty that can come from that as well.
I think by election day, it won't be a national mandate, but I think that restaurants across this country, for instance, will be mostly shut down because it'll be so cool in so many places and people will start moving in so quickly. And all of a sudden the rates, that's what's going to cause the rates to spike because I have to go out. I have to have my dinner. I have to get my nails done, whatever. But it's all going to have to happen inside because it's going to get too cold. And then people are going to start getting infected at a much quicker rate. And that's where that model is going to possibly be very rough.
Yeah.
So anyway, we beat a dead horse here, I think, or hopefully not dead yet. But Jason, you want to wrap it up? If you can come back off of me, he can't. He's done. It's been a very interesting week between where we've been sitting. Between where we've been sitting and what's been in the background for all of us. I imagine Chad has the quietest, venue for where.
No, he's sitting on a soundproof porch. It sounds like probably.
No, well, I'm up 6 floors, but there were a couple times when I had to mute because I've got the guys come by selling things like aguacate, avocados, and limons, oranges, fresh, cheap. Just yelling out through these giant microphones, and they're distorted, and I'm like, oh no, I better mute it.
Anyway, this has been quite an interesting week with the whole thing after the debate and the president. To think that we are still 3 weeks away from the election, or 3.5 weeks away from the election, is unbelievable. The way this is going, we saw Tuesday what a shit show it was good. Tuesday? Wednesday?
It was Tuesday.
Tuesday. What a shit show it was going to be. And we've seen what a shit show, and even more of a shit show it's become since Tuesday. Hang on, folks. This is going to be a hell of a roller coaster ride. Malls here at Dad's on Life. Take care, everybody.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.